Hi, my name is Julia. For our group's final project, we designed an automatic pet feeder that is meant to get an input from various sensors on a microcontroller and give them to the Basis 3 board to determine an output. For the purpose of this video today, all of the demonstrations will be completed on the Basis 3 board only, utilizing buttons to act as our sensors in the demo.
A really common problem for pet owners is making sure their pets get the right amount of food at consistent times. Now, I used to have a cat and I loved her very, very much, and I always tried to make sure that she was perfectly fed. But with busy schedules, it is easy to forget a feeding or to just overfill the bowl and let your pet eat to their heart's desire. Which sounds nice and cute, but when you begin to see your pet get fatter and fatter and fatter and all these health problems arise, it really breaks your heart. And we all love our pets and we want them to live relatively long and healthy lives. I actually used to accidentally overfeed my cat. She would always meow, and I felt so bad, so I'd put a lot of food into her bowl, hoping that it would last for a few days, only to see that later that day that the bowl is empty, and my cat, my beloved pet, went from being a playful and energetic, cherished companion to someone I still cherished, but she wouldn't play with me anymore. She couldn't run as fast, she would sleep too much, and I sleep a lot, but she would sleep too much, and she began to have health problems, and we had to spend a lot of money, I tell you, a lot of money to get her back in shape. I wish this would have never happened in the first place. I really do. And it would not have happened had I had what we present to you today. Our project is a portion controlled automatic pet feeder designed to fix exactly that problem by automating when and how much food is dispensed and by adding some safety checks around it. Our feeder has two main modes, idle and feeding. In idle, it just waits for a signal. In feeding, it actively dispenses food. It can be triggered in two ways. Automatic timing, that is when the timer expires, it will start a feeding cycle. And manual override, that is when the owner can press a button to feed on demand, right? So to keep things safe and reliable, we use three sensors. A bowl sensor that checks if the bowl is already full, a reservoir sensor that makes sure that there's actually food left in the container, and an overflow sensor that stops feeding if food starts to pile up where it shouldn't, right? We don't like messy households, right? We don't want the food to spill all over the place. So if any of those sensors detect a problem, the system automatically resets back to idle and stops the motor so we're not spilling food everywhere, right? Or running the motor dry. That's another thing. Under the hood, all of this is coordinated by a Mealy-type finite-state machine that is implemented on the Basis 3 FPGA, working together with a microcontroller that handles the sensors and motor control. So overall, the purpose of our project is to give pet owners like myself reliable, portion-controlled, and hands-off feeding with built-in safety features that react immediately to real-time conditions. So next time you're going out and about, you don't have to worry if your cat's gonna get really, really fat and explode, right? We're gonna have that peace of mind. So now I'll hand it over to my group mate, who'll explain the state diagram and walk us through how the logic actually works in more detail.
Hello. Our finite state machine uses 6 inputs to determine whether the feeder should remain idle or begin dispensing food. These inputs include the timer expired signal, an external reset, a manual feed button, and the three safety related sensors, the bowl sensor, the reservoir sensor, and the overflow sensor. Each of these inputs plays a specific role, either triggering a feeding event or preventing feeding when conditions are unsafe. The system also produces two outputs. The state output, which indicates whether the feeder is in the idle or feeding state, and Q, which activates the motor whenever the machine enters the feeding state. Functionally, the FSM has two states, idle and feeding. The idle state, the machine is waiting for either the timer to expire or the manual button to be pressed. A transition to feeding occurs only if all safety sensors confirm that the bowl is present, the reservoir has food, and overflow is not detected. Once in the feeding state, the feeder dispenses food while continuously monitoring the sensors. If at any moment the sensor detects a problem, such as an empty reservoir or a full bowl, the system transitions back to idle to stop feeding immediately. The design also incorporates an internal reset mechanism that combines the external reset with the output logic to ensure the machine can always return safely to the idle state. This prevents undefined behavior and it keeps the system reliable even during unexpected conditions. Overall, the FSM integrates multiple outputs, real-time decision logic, and safety features to create a controlled, dependable, automated pet feeding system.
Hello, I'm Carlos Diaz, and I will be demonstrating our pet feeder finite state machine is working correctly on a field programmable gate array. To start, we will set all sensor inputs to save conditions and test the reset error behavior. So save conditions for this feeder would mean that the reservoir sensor is on, which means there's food available, the bowl sensor is off, and the overflow sensor is off. So to test the reset, we will enable the reset error switch, which we assume would permanently remain in the idle state. And we could check this by doing the manual feed button, seeing how it does not dispense, and when the timer expires, it still doesn't dispense if an error is detected by the switch being on. So our next test case is the manual feed button, and it should always feed when sensors are in safe conditions. So let's turn the reset error switch off and keep the sensors in safe conditions that they previously were in. So we're going to be testing the manual feed button, and you click it and it dispenses food. Even if there's food in the bowl, it will still dispense food unless the bowl is overflowing, which would enable this sensor, and it would not dispense any food. So I'm going to return the sensors back to safe conditions, and we'll go on to our next test case. Which is that the timer expired while bowl still has food. So normally, in safe conditions, the timer does dispense food. But if there's already a portion in the bowl, already some food still left there, even if the timer expired, we don't expect any food to be dispensed. So let's turn on the bowl sensor. And you notice here, the timer expires, it does not dispense, but the manual button will dispense. So let's put that back down, go on to our next case, which is we ran out of food. And if we don't have food, we expect there to always remain in the idle state, almost like the error switch. So let's turn off the we have food. And you notice the manual button and the timer, no matter what happens, it will not dispense food. So that's all the test cases.